Okay, I'd like to call to order the Trophy Club Municipal District Number 1 Board of Directors meeting. We have a quorum. We have Secretary Treasurer Flynn, Director Chapman, Director Casway, and Vice President Rose. We're all present. Citizens comment. This is an opportunity for citizens to address the board on any matter, and it is 6:30 p.m. This is an opportunity for citizens to address the board on any matter, whether or not it's posted on the agenda. The board is not permitted to take action or to discuss any presentations made to the board at this time concerning an item not listed on the agenda. The board will hear presentations on specific agenda items prior to the board addressing those items. You may speak up to 3 minutes or the time limit determined by the president or presiding officer. Are there any citizen comments?
No.
Okay, hearing none, we'll move into the consent agenda. All matters considered as a consent agenda are considered to be routine by the board of directors and will be enacted by one motion. There will not be a separate discussion of these items. If discussion is desired, that item will be removed from the consent agenda and will be considered separately. Number 1, consider and take appropriate action to approve the consent agenda. A, the 2018 check register. B, June 18, 2018 special meeting minutes. C, June 18. Is that correct?
Yes.
June 18, 2018. Oh, that's right. Regular meeting minutes. D, tax collection report for third quarter fiscal year 2018. E, the quarterly investment report third quarter 2018. I'll entertain a motion if there's not a desire to discuss any of these separately.
Motion to accept.
We have a motion by Director Chapman to approve all the consent agenda items. Do we have a second?
Yeah, I second.
We have a second by Director Castaway. There'll be no discussion. All in favor indicate by raising your hand. Motion passes unanimously. We enter into regular session. Receive an update from Fire Chief Wade Carroll regarding the Fire Protection Services fiscal year 2019 budget. Chief Carroll, please begin.
Good evening, Mr. President, directors. Thank you for having me here tonight to go over some of the goals and objectives that we've accomplished this year, some of the goals and objectives that we have scheduled for 2019, and of course the budget that it's going to take to make those goals happen. Let me get started here. All right, our 17-18 goals, we had 12 goals divided into 6 critical service areas for 17-18. 6 of those goals were already completed by the end of the third quarter. One goal looks like we're going to push into the next fiscal year, and all the other goals are scheduled and are on time to be completed as scheduled. Our 17-18 goals that have been completed, we're increasing the number of critical tasks that can be accomplished on the fire scenes and during EMS scenes during the peak time hours. So that's between the hours of 6:30 in the morning until 9:30 at night. We did a study last year right as I came on board to look at those peak time hours and said, hey, the majority of our calls happen during this time period. We, with y'all's permission, we upped staffing to a 5-man minimum. During those times, in years previously, we had a 4-man minimum staffing 24 hours a day. That 5th man during those critical time periods allowed us to ensure that we had enough people on board to get those critical tasks accomplished. If we were to have a fire during that period, we can accomplish 2 of the main tasks of putting water on a fire or stopping the growth of the fire and doing search and rescue at the same time. We could also split crews if we had to and run 2 calls simultaneously, which is a big deal during that time period as well. As we look backward, we had quite a few times during the month where we had 2 calls coming in at once, causing us to require mutual aid to come into Trophy Club. We are created response standards for all call types. We had 1 response standard that was in the dispatch record for structure fires, and now we have all 63 call types have a full response standard. So you don't get the same thing for a structure fire that you get for an EMS call, that you get for a fire alarm at a one-door business versus a fire alarm at the Holiday Inn, for instance. And that ensures that we have all those people on scene that we need to get the job done. We are decreasing our door-to-needle and door-to-balloon time for MIs and stroke. We're utilizing some new technology in our cell phones where we can activate the stroke teams at the hospital from the scenes that we are on in your homes. This is allowing us to have people meet us at the doors of the hospital. We're also working on some hands-on training to ensure that our scene times are quicker and able to get out there. Yes, sir.
What does MI stand for?
Myocardial ischemia.
Infarction?
Yeah, yeah. So myocardial ischemia or infarction, yeah. So it's heart attacks and strokes is what we're talking about. So anyways, we actually got an award from the Baylor Medical Center here in Grapevine for the month of April, I believe. We had the fastest times for all of our MI patients that we took from Trophy Club up to Baylor compared to anyone in our region. So being close to the hospital, of course, helps, but you know, Grapevine and South Lake are close as well, and we beat them out even with fewer calls. So we're very proud of that. We increased our efficiency on CPR scenes and our return of spontaneous circulation for CPR calls. We purchased a device that does automated CPR. Frees the hands up of one rescue provider, right, so that we can do more things on a scene at once. And it also allows us to take less people to the hospital in the back of the ambulance. So instead of having one person doing compressions, one person giving breaths, another person drawing up meds, now we only have to take two in the back of the ambulance to the hospital, and it helps us, again, make other calls while that call is going on. So that's very good. Increasing the level of knowledge and the abilities for our fire inspectors. Very proud that we got some new technology there as well. We have iPads that have the Firehouse Inspector program on them. This ensures that all fire inspections are done the same way, at the same level, which has not been done in the past. We also brought on a part-time fire inspector who takes care of all new construction at a very cheap price compared to bringing on a full-time personnel. We don't have to pay him any benefits, and he's only working 20 hours a week. And he's taking over the whole PD 25 and the PD 30 projects that are coming up to ensure that the same eyes are looking at that project from the beginning all the way to the end. He also came in with a great deal of knowledge. He was the assistant fire marshal in Grapevine, and he brought the Great Wolf Lodge and the the great big center out there, the conference center in Grapevine.
Gaylord.
Thank you. And the Gaylord Center, from ground to its completion, he was in charge of both those projects. So he's a real asset for our department, brings a wealth of knowledge, and he has been putting on classes within our department to increase the knowledge of our inspectors that are on shift. Lastly, we are improving the marketing and public education events, or the marketing for our public education events. We're working with our PIO more than ever, and then we're working with our parks team as well to kind of team up on a lot of the activities that they have going on and ensure that we're in front of the right people at the right times. Still to be completed, we have to determine the response times at 90th percentile. In Trophy Club in the past, we've always gone to average, so any response times that you guys have seen in the past have been an average response time. I don't like that number because that means that half of my responses are slower than that. So we're going to look at things at the 90th percentile, and that gives me a 10% window for those middle-of-the-night calls and those special circumstances. Otherwise, we need to be in a certain range. And once we get those numbers in at the end of the year, we'll be able to set a benchmark to be shooting for in the next year and ensure that we're doing things to meet those benchmarks. Doing EMS and fire pre-plans on all of our special events and high-hazard locations. That's all your schools, the hotels, those kind of places. We want to make sure that not just for a fire incident, but for a major EMS incident, we're prepared to mitigate those situations if at all possible. We're increasing the staff's ability to teach public education to all age level groups. We're working with several of our firefighters in charge of public education, and I call it public education in a box. Basically, we'll have a bunch of classes set aside, so if we get a request to go to a third grade class versus going to a junior high class, we can pull the right age level classes out of there, and any shift should be able to teach those without any problems. Right now, a lot of our public education is just done by one shift, so we're trying to make that more universal. And then we're increasing our hands-on training for the shift personnel by about 10%. So that we've already done that a little bit. We've gone to 2 live fire trainings this year, and we have another one scheduled for August. We're not training if it's not 110 outside, you know, so we want to make sure that we're out there and ready to go. So the live fire training has really helped us out. We're focusing on speed And we're a small department with few assets, so the faster we get water on the fire, we change the conditions inside those fires, then the better off we're going to be. We've done some other things like changing our hose diameter, which sounds silly, but you have 175 GPM nozzle, gallons per minute nozzle, right? You can use 2-inch hose to push that 175 gallons a minute, or you can use 1 3/4 hose to push that same 175 gallons per minute. The difference is about 20 pounds per 50-foot section, so you can imagine we can move a whole lot faster when we're 80 to 100 pounds lighter pushing that down the hallway than we can with 2 guys pushing a heavier load. So doing things like that just makes sense to help us do our jobs a little better. Our FY 18-19 goals for this next year that we're looking to accomplish will be finishing the development of those EMS and fire pre-plans of all those high hazard locations. We're just not going to have the opportunity to get through all those. There was less done on those and previously than we had thought, so as we dug in a little bit deeper, we're just going to need a little more time to get all those completed. So we're going to work heavily towards that. And then we're going to continue to improve the town of Trophy Club's preparations for large emergencies and weather events. So that's our emergency management training. We did a lot of emergency management training with our staff this year. We're going to roll in some scenario-based training and those kind of things in this next year to come. So we're excited about getting that done.
So Wade,
Yes,
what would classify a large emergency?
A tornado that came through town.
I mean, is it just weather related?
Most of the stuff that we would deal with was weather related, but it could also include a shooting at the school or something that happens at the hotel. And when we're talking about overwhelming our resources in a very short period of time, so both police and fire. So we're working heavily in that area, just getting ready for those different possible events. We're also going to implement company and individual quarterly evolutions. This is just a testing procedure to ensure that every quarter we're doing something to prove that we're out there training, right? So I want these guys training and getting better at their craft all the time. Well, if you're not testing it, they're not training it, right? So we're going to make sure that every quarter we're doing something individually, whether it be a map test or just a certain amount of time that you have to put your gear on or something like that. Maybe have a rescue off a second-story balcony, something of that nature, or out of a second-story window. We can test all those and give them a specific time parameter that they need to do. Or company evolutions, where you pull up to a certain spot, you lay some hose, you pull off a line, you squirt some water, that kind of thing. And we're just getting better at that craft and making sure that we're making those positive steps forward throughout the year. We're also revising our field training manual for EMS and fire employee onboarding. Our onboarding process right now is much too lengthy, and there's a lot of dead time in there that we're going to get rid of. My objective is to try to get a new person on board, counting as the person that I'm paying for, and giving care, critical care to our patients within about a 6-month time period. It's usually taking about 8 months to a year to get those people properly trained. We can do it much faster than that, so we're working towards that. We're going to update our website along with the town. We're doing an SOP and policy revision. As you recall, last year we put our first set of SOPs in place. As we are here for a year now that I've been here for a year, we see the holes in that a little bit, and we see some needs in some different areas that aren't addressed through that SOP manual. So it's good to go back and review those things at least every other year, but I think this next year is a prime time for us to continue in that endeavor to get better. We're going to implement a replacement plan for all of our equipment. So what I plan to bring forward to both you, the board, and to the council is a complete equipment list, anything over a certain dollar value and how long the manufacturer says they're good for, how long their warranty periods are good for, and we're just going to roll in a replacement plan for each of those so that I'm not coming back to Carmen, or I'm not coming back to council and asking for $5,000 more here to replace a saw and $10,000 there to replace this little piece of equipment. All that should be rolled into a schedule that you guys have already approved. And I know when I hit the 10-year mark, it's time to replace extrication equipment. When I hit a 7-year mark, it's time to replace an ambulance cot, for instance, something that only has a 7-year lifespan. So those kind of things, we're just trying to make this a little easier for everybody involved. All right, next step, we're going to look at a little bit of our outstanding debt that we have this year. Completed in 2012 was the fire station. That will be paid off in 2031. We have about $1.97 million remaining on that bond, and the annual payment on that is about $150,000 and some change a year. We also have a payment to the old MUD that gave a cash payment towards that building. There's $885,000 remaining on that, and the payment of $68,096 a year back to the MUD reserves is still ongoing. Truck 681 is our other large piece of indebtedness. We still owe $508,596 on that, and we make an annual payment of $127,149. That is the majority of the debt that we have other than our operating expenses for the fire department. All right, revenues. If we look at revenues for the fire department, revenues are not, or fire departments are not revenue generators for most cities. We cost a lot more than we bring you. I'm sorry. That's just kind of the price of public service, I'm afraid. But what we've done this year that's different than what we've done in years past is we've actually reviewed and restructured our fee schedule. In the past, we never did charge for any of our fire marshal fees like plan review, inspection fees, those kinds of things. Those were all just freely given. And to be quite honest, they weren't performed at the level that I would want to feel good about charging for anyways. Now that we bring in a professional level and we're increasing the level of our effectiveness, and now we can charge those fees accordingly, I believe. So we've restructured the fee schedule, and if you just look at the PD 30 fee schedule, we're looked to take in about approximately $195,000 in fire department fees just for PD 30. PD 25 was already out of the ground when the fee schedule was adopted, so we won't really see any fees other than re-inspection fees for PD 25. But PD 30, that thing was in place long before they get started, and we'll start seeing the fees come in when they start going vertical. So we won't see any of this underground work. None of those fees are generated by the fire department. We start our inspections and that kind of, yes, sir.
Chief, those fees are handled under the town's fee schedule?
That's correct.
Thank you.
Handled under the town's fee schedule and then reconciled at the end of our year as per the contract. All right, now let's look at our budget overview. So you kind of heard a little bit about our goals and objectives of what we've accomplished this year, the goals and objectives for next year, a little bit about the revenue that we're able to generate, and a lot about the debt that we generate on an annual basis as well. But the new budget for 2019, we're asking for $1.373 million for the fire department budget. This includes both personnel and services and supplies. And I'll break that down a little bit. So in FY19 personnel expenses, the total requested amount is $993,982. The major changes that you're going to see in this submitted budget from years previously is the part-time fire marshal that we talked about. That's the that we brought on for PD 25 and PD 30. All new constructions and plan reviews are being handled by him, as I stated earlier. That guy was brought in place with a thought that these fees that we're charging, he's going to pay for himself, right? So that $195,000 is more than paying for him for the next 3 or 4 years. The reality is, in 3 to 4 years when this is completed, I'm not real sure that we're going to need a full-time or even a part-time fire marshal at that point, or not a fire marshal, but a fire inspector, just because the majority of the building is completed. And that's part of the reason we went with a part-time position, is because it's a little more easily pushed to the side when it's finished. The guy that we brought in, like I talked about before, he's retired out of Grapevine, so he looks at this as another opportunity to make a little bit more money here during his retirement. So he expects this to be coming. That's not a big deal. He's working 20 hours a week, and he's getting $20 an hour. So we are looking at the possibility of pushing him to 30 hours a week, which is, it may not take 30 hours a week, but if you look out there and you see where they are on PD 30, they're already moving pad sites around, and I'm afraid what's going to happen is you're going to see all of that come out of the ground pretty close to the same time, where originally we were told, hey, we're going to work on this section first, and then we're going to work on this section over here next. And so the apartments were going to be first, and then commercial was going to be last. But it looks like I see pad sites already for the commercial. So what we're expecting is he's going to be a busy man out there at PD 30 almost every day. So it's going to take a few more hours than we originally thought. You're also going to see an increase in the personnel due to my salary. I was brought on May the 1st. So that's only 6 months of the year was in last year's budget, so you're going to have the other half of my salary being in this next year's budget as well. It's part of the increase. And then the shared expense of the administrative assistant. Anita Otterson is doing a great job for us. That was a shared position with the town manager last year. As her role has changed and as we have needed more and more assistance there with the fire department, she's taken on a little bit more. Then now she's spending the majority of her time between EMS needs, fire needs, and then public service at the window and answering phones. So we're that position in the years past was the town manager, split it with our EMS department. Now the town manager is no longer utilizing her, so she's being utilized more on the fire side than that. So we're splitting that cost of that personnel between the town and the MUD still, but it's the fire department and the EMS department that's paying for it. Let's see, the shared expense and admin. And then the change in holiday pay from overtime to straight time. So that's just a changing of where money sits. We no longer pay holiday pay as overtime. We pay holiday pay as straight time within the pay period that it is earned. And that means it just goes from the overtime pot over to the full-time pot or over to the salaries pot in order to make sure that the money is there for us to take on. Yes, sir?
2 questions. So just a level set, the 18 budget was just over $1 million?
Yes,
Is
I
that the
believe.
million 50,000, something like that?
Yes, sir. Yes,
Okay. And then you mentioned that in May is when you came on board.
sir.
Was there a fire chief before that, any part of that year or not?
There was, but it was an interim position, and to be quite honest, I don't even know what his salary was as an interim. I know it wasn't a full-time position salary.
Okay.
Let me see here. I gotta get caught up. I'm talking faster than I'm flipping pages. The increase in the personnel budget is 18.37%. It's $154,000 is the total amount. And again, the majority of those changes are the changes that you see here. Also on the personnel side, I think it's in the next slide, is overtime costs. So this year is the first time that we have split out FLSA overtime and staffing overtime. That has never been tracked separately. So FLSA is the Fair Labor and Standards Act, which says that over 40 hours a week, then you get overtime, right? Over 40 hours, and it's not a pay period, it's an actual week at a time, right? Well, because of the fireman's schedule, we work on average a 56-hour work week. Well, they're not gonna give you 16 hours of overtime every single work week, right? So they've made a compromise in that area. And what's happened is now FLSA requires you to pay 6 hours of overtime every 2 weeks to firefighters. So we had always lumped that 6 hours in with all the rest of our overtime. When I came on board, our finance department on the town and I got together, and they did a great job of developing a system where they can divide that out now. So I can see what is FLSA, what's mandatorily paid overtime, and what is overtime that's generated from staffing issues or operational expenses. So after doing that math, looking at last year, it looks like extrapolating, or just looking at this first half a year and then extrapolating out for the rest of the year, it's $84,000 a year is what we're paying in FLSA overtime. Well, my budget is $100,000. Well, we wonder why am I busting a budget in the fire department on overtime year after year after year, is because if you look at the FLSA, $84,000, the amount of accrued leave that firefighters get if you just let those guys take off when they're supposed to take off, and then you have to backfill their spots. The training, the 4th of July, as you see there, and the total comes to $112,000. So we're already upside down just paying the things that have to be paid on an annual basis. That doesn't include if I get a firefighter that hurts a back, or his wife has a child, or something like that that has FLSA, or not FLSA, FMLA, too many acronyms. We get an injured firefighter. It doesn't include overtime required for extra training. And if I train a whole company at a time, I've got to backfill this station. I can only ask our neighbors to do it so many times. I usually try to, one time a year, pay the overtime, and the other 2 or 3 times a year, try to get our neighbors to help fill that in. But we can't expect our neighbors to shoulder all of that burden 100% of the time. I just don't feel like that's correct. So asking for an additional $30,000 is what that's going to give me, is a $34,000 there to help me with some sick time, FMLA, those injured firefighters, and so on. The last big piece of the personnel budget is that there's been a 15% increase in medical insurance. As all of y'all probably know from your own businesses, medical insurance doesn't ever go down. That thing is always creeping forward. This was an estimate that was given to us. Our final numbers don't come in until the end of the month. We're expecting to negotiate that down around the 12-13% mark, but we're budgeting that at 15% just to make sure that we capture any possibility there. We do have a slight increase in the physical testing, as we're now going to be testing next year for cancer in firefighters. Cancer last year, or year before last, surpassed heart attacks as the #1 killer of firefighters in the United States. So this is a big deal, and you'll see that this is one of the reasons for the major, one of the more expensive supplemental requests that we have. And then we also have an increase of $4,600 in our tuition reimbursement, where just more firefighters are taking advantage of that benefit. Any question on personnel before we keep trudging on forward? We can answer questions at the end as well, but I tried to cover the highlights. In our services and supplies budget, you're going to see the total request is $379,192. The increase is $136,322. Don't let that scare you. A lot of that, $95,000 or $92,500 of that is in 2 supplemental requests. One is the exhaust reclamation system, and that's what we were talking about before with the cancer screenings. What we found is that we're fighting fires less and less, as you guys have seen in this town of Trophy Club. We don't fight a ton of fires every year. Where we're killing firefighters is not in the acute exposures, but it's in the long-term exposures. So every morning they're out there checking trucks. Every morning they're out there checking equipment, making sure that they're ready to make those calls when it's necessary, right? And those engines have to idle for a certain amount of time. They got to put up the engines, their pumps through the paces, all that kind of thing. Well, all that exhaust is just sitting around in there, and those guys are breathing that stuff in. Those harmful carcinogens like benzene is one of the major components of diesel exhaust. An exhaust reclamation system takes the exhaust from the tailpipe itself. It's a hose that connects directly to the tailpipe and sends it out the top of the building. So the system that we have in place currently is an air scrubbing system. So the air scrubbing system, these devices hang from the ceiling. And then the idea behind it was this exhaust goes up to the ceiling, gets sucked up there to the ceiling, and goes through a series of filters, and then comes out clean on the other side. The problem with this is that most of your diesel exhaust, most of the chemicals within diesel exhaust, CO and those kind of things, their specific density is so close to air that they're not naturally lighter than air and going to the ceiling. So this was a flawed system from its design standpoint, and the fans in them aren't strong enough to move the amount of air that's inside those. Yes, sir.
Is this essentially the same exhaust issue that we noticed 3 or 4 years ago when we were doing a
That
lot
is
of the
correct.
major repairs, and this was just simply one that never occurred?
That's correct. It was asked for, I believe, previously, and was never approved, or we didn't have enough information to bring you, or to get the approval, or whatever it was. But yes, it is. And if you go out to the bay today and you look beside all these pieces of equipment, what you see is soot-stained walls, right, where these walls need to get painted again already just since 2012, just because of the amount of exhaust that these units are putting out, right, and staining this stuff. So these guys are breathing that in. We've done some air monitoring in the station and in the bay during the mornings while doing equipment checks, and what we're actually finding is inside the station we're seeing CO levels of 5 parts per million. 9 parts per million in your home, and we'd make you evacuate until we got it cleaned out, right? And inside the bay itself, we're seeing the levels as high as 25 parts per million. At 30 parts per million, it's an IDLH, immediately damaging to life and health, right? And you're required to wear an SCBA on a fire scene that has a 30 parts per million CO level. And we got it at 25 in our bay right now. So that's concerning to me. I hope it's concerning to you guys as well, and it's definitely concerning to our firefighters that are in it every single day. Yes, sir.
Were those readings taken with the doors open?
Doors were open, yes, sir.
Thank you.
Yep. And doors closed inside the building. The other major expense as part of that 92.5 is a half a set of extrication tools. So we have 2 sets of extrication tools in the fire department. One, both of them are hydraulic tools that we use to cut cars, to open doors, to cut rebar, to help rescue anybody that could be entrapped in a vehicle or in construction equipment or whatever it is, right? One of our sets is 11 years old. The other set was purchased when the truck was purchased as part of the truck. The set that is 11 years old is well past its useful life. That set does not have the strength to cut the modern metals like boron that are in vehicles, and it does not cut the rolled metals that you see and that the vehicle manufacturers are using now to protect vehicles in the case of rollover. So if our frontline piece of extrication equipment is out of service for either testing or it's on another vehicle that we couldn't get to because it's on a previous call, then I can't have a second set of tools there to do the work. They have newer technology now that is all battery operated. It's battery operated hydraulics, and they're actually stronger than the hydraulic pumps that we have now that are run off gasoline generators. With the battery powered units, we can actually use them in a smoke filled environment, which is handy for breaking into houses and those kind of things that are on fire, or from rescuing victims inside a burning house where we couldn't before, because you'd have to use a gasoline-powered motor in a smoke-filled environment. They just choke themselves out after a while. So what I'm shooting for here is we're asking for half that extrication equipment this year and half next year to kind of try to lighten that burden. The burden of the exhaust reclamation system, that system is about $75,000. When you guys were approached last time, and the previous bids that I found in the desk when I took over was around that 55 to 60 mark. As you all well know, everything is just creeping up year after year, and my fear is we don't do it now, it's going to be $100,000 before we know it. Other major changes, we're truing up our software and support budget. Mike Pastor, the IT manager, has gone through and looked a little more heavily at things like that we weren't being charged for in the past on the fire side, like our Microsoft Office usage, those kind of things. So those are actually being charged per user now instead of just letting that pass through without a cost. We're increasing the training and the associated travel expenses. Like I said, after being here a year, you find our areas of fault a little more in depth, and we're going to be working on those. So I'm sending some people to some specific training if approved, and they're going to be bringing some of that back. Anybody that we send away to training that has travel expenses with us is required to give a presentation to the whole department when they come back on what they learned on their excursion, so to speak. Vehicle and equipment maintenance costs are increasing somewhat. Those vehicle and equipment maintenance costs are just equipment that's coming out of warranty, like my vehicle, and it's just costing a little bit more money to maintain on an annual basis. And then dispatching fees, we have a slight increase in dispatching fees because of it's based on our call volume. And we're seeing, we saw about a 200, we're expecting to see about a 200 call increase this year over last year. All right, being prepared for the future. Future expenses that we need to be thinking about heavily, just not in 2019, but in the years to come. Right now we have 5 firefighters per shift. That means every time I have somebody off, I'm below that minimum staffing number, right? So it's causing us to use those part-time personnel and our overtime in order to beef that up during the peak time hours. With PD 30 coming on board, with PD 25 finishing up, we're going to see more entertainment district that's going to push that peak time hours over that 9:30, 10 o'clock hour. It gets really hard to start bringing in part-time firefighters when you tell them they can't go home till 1 o'clock in the morning. So we're probably going to have to push that over to a full-time position once we see that number start to change. There's a way that we can help offset some of those costs until PD 30 is completed and we start seeing some tax revenue come in from those valuations. There's a SAFER grant that's out there. That's a 3-year grant process that the grant pays for 75% of your personnel for the first 2 years, and the third year it drops to 35%. That is something I'd be very interested in trying to get a grant writer to help us apply for and actually have it in the budget this next year to ask a grant writer. You can sign a contract with them, they'll do it multiple years. So if you don't get it the first year, they reapply with you the second year. With the goal being sometime between 2019 and 2021, we'd be putting on that 6th firefighter per shift. When fully staffed, that means I'd have 4 on the engine and 2 on the ambulance, which we can get a lot more accomplished like that than you can with 3 and 2 during just the peak time hours. I'd love to go for an assistant or deputy chief sometime in that same time period between 2020 and 2021. Again, right now, our captains are carrying a lot of the administrative burden. I have captains that are in charge of EMS, training, vehicle maintenance, equipment maintenance, those types of things, and I just need to get them focused a little further on getting better at their craft and getting their crews better at their craft. And in order to do that, I've got to lighten that administrative burden as much as possible. So I've taken on as much as I can take on, and still have a forward look. But I'd like to increase my forward look from a month or two down the road to 6 months to a year or two down the road, you know, as we push into the future here. Engine 681 is about to need to be replaced. In 2022, we'll look at replacing engine 681 with a Quint, which is another vehicle that has a ladder on top, right? They didn't have it available when our current truck was purchased in 2015, but they now have a 106-foot ladder that runs on a single rear axle. It lightens the load by about 30,000 pounds, so it's a 55,000 pound vehicle versus an 84 or 82,000 pound vehicle that we have currently. That makes a big difference in our maintenance costs and how much we're chewing up tires, and it's a little more appropriate for our everyday use. If possible, we would purchase this and then push our current truck to the reserve status. The other thing that does for us is it helps us position ourselves in future years to increase our ISO rating. Part of what your ISO rating looks at is if you have so many structures over 2 stories high, you got to have a truck. We have a truck. They also want you to have a backup, because what happens when this truck is out on a call or this truck is in for service? Then you got to have mutual aid coming in within a certain amount of time. And currently, with Westlake not having a truck, Roanoke has a truck, but they don't staff it every day. So we're looking at Southlake as really our closest option, and we can't guarantee that they'll be here in the right amount of time to keep our ISO ratings where they need to be. So with that second vehicle in, we'll always have a frontline vehicle that has a ladder on it. Let's see, tech replacement schedules, we're looking at $10,000 in 2020 and another $19,000 in 2025. That's just part of the regular replacement plan that the IT department has put in place for us. The big dollar figure for us, another big dollar figure, is the SCBA replacement. SCBAs are really only good for about 15 years. 10 years is the optimal time to replace them, while they'll still give you some value back through the market if you auction those things off. If you push them past their complete lifespan, then you get nothing in return for those things. So the idea generally is that you go 10 years and you auction those things off and get something back, and to help you pay for your new units. Extrication equipment in 2025, that's that second set that I was talking about that's on the truck now. The lifespan for the extrication equipment is about 10 years. And then we begin our radio replacement program in 2025 as well. We replace all of the car radios and all of our handheld radios in that same time period. Again, technology changes. We'll be pushing things a little further down the road. We'll also now have dual band radios that we can communicate with anybody in the state of Texas with for the same price that a single band radio is utilized now. Yes, sir.
Just a quick question, is that $20,000 over the 4 years, or is it $20,000 each year?
It's consecutive years of $20,000, yes, sir. That probably wasn't worded correctly. I'll change that for you. Future plans. One of the things that I'm working with some of our area fire chiefs on is we're in the discussions now of sharing an emergency manager with Roanoke, Westlake, and Trophy Club. If a major event was to occur, tornado comes through Trophy Club, a major event occurs here in Trophy Club, more than likely Roanoke or Westlake will be affected as well, right, in some way or fashion. So we can all stand up our own emergency operations centers individually, and then we're going to be all trying to steal the same equipment from the county and from the state at the same time. Or we can combine our efforts and really do a good job of assessing the needs and prioritizing the needs and getting the right equipment to the right places without stepping on each other's toes. That's the idea behind that. The other idea is that we have mirrored EOCs that have the same capabilities. So we get a tornado that comes through Trophy Club, tears Trophy Club's EOC up along with a lot of damage to homes and everything. We can just run everything right out of Roanoke or out of Westlake who didn't have damage. I'm really excited about that. I think it's something that will help us out a lot in all of our communities. We're all smaller communities, right? Each one of those. So part of our issue is that we have 6 directors, 4 directors, 2 chiefs in Trophy Club. They have the same setup in Westlake, same setup in Roanoke as well, right? So I can work through one operation period. I've got 6 directors, so I've got a town manager who can run command, and I've got 6 directors. I can push 15, maybe 18 hours on these folks before you got to let them go rest. Well, by combining these emergency operations centers, now I have 18 directors that are equally trained, right, that we can get together, and now I can work through multiple operational periods and enable us to push along further and further down the line until we get some resources coming from both the county or the state to help us run those systems if it's needed over that long of a period of time. Most of those emergencies are handled, the majority of the work, within 2 days. So unless it's one of the major floods or something like we've seen in South Texas, but most of the tornado activity is done in 2 days. So if we can get through a 2-day time period, then we're in great shape. That's 4 operational periods though. So we need at least 2 groups to make that happen. A possible shared station with Roanoke. This again is kind of a long shot, but we have areas of town that we can't meet even a 6.5 minute response time to the far north end of town. And I think he said 40 or 45% of their call volume in Roanoke goes to Walmart, and they can't meet that response time at Walmart either. So you can imagine anything further north along this 377 corridor is the same way. Roanoke has a brand new fire chief. I met him just the other day. We're going to sit down and start talking about different ways that we can work together in the future. This is one way that I think that we might be able to get ahead and be able to ensure that we have the right response times and the right number of personnel on scenes in the future, is to share some of those costs associated with adding a station rather than trying to fit that burden upon one department or the other. Is it 100% necessary? Not unless you have that 7-minute response to your house, right? That's what we have to think about. Along with that, I would like to shoot for a best practices accreditation and reduction of our ISO rating. Both of those things would be several years out, as I'm keeping those in mind as we bring on new equipment, as we bring on personnel, as we train personnel, as we shoot towards bettering how we do our business, as we look at how we report how well we do our business, so that we have all those things in place so when it's time to pull the trigger, it's just calling the state and saying, hey, we're ready, come on down, instead of having to jump through hoops and everything for a couple of years trying to get this accomplished. So those are the long-term plans for the fire department. That's the end of my presentation. I'd love to hear any questions that you might have about any of that, long-term and short-term, and any of the budget presentation that you heard tonight.
So I noticed the budget was going up to, and I'll round, 1.37 million.
Yes, sir.
But there's also 195,000 in potential revenue, maybe more, so 200K. So from 1 million to 1.3, that's 320,000, but the true net is really only about 130, 140,000, if I understand the numbers correctly, because of the increase in revenue from fire fees. Is that the proper way to look at it?
Yes and no. Yes, for the year one, the problem is a lot of those fees are going to be recurring fees, right? And that 195, once PD 30 is built, you
Goes
won't have
away.
that goes away. Now, you will have more tax revenue coming in at that point, but again, like I said, we're going to need some more personnel and things that are going to help us get over that hump that comes with the increased call volume and everything you're going to see from PD 30, right? So it's not something you can count on, but for this year, yes, that offsetting revenue helps. Ms.
Chief, I pulled up last year's, the 2018 budget, and it shows a proposed total fire expenses of 1.551.
For this year, for 19, so last year we projected that it would be 1.551. The question I'd have for that is in
That's current fiscal year. What we're in right now, 1.55.
1.55. So we projected 1.0 or 1.03, right? I think that's
4, yeah. Oh,
for this year. We project on one. Is that right? 1.03. Isn't that what we said? I believe that's correct. I'd have to go back and look. Projected.
1.331.
I'm sorry.
1.33.
1.
1.331. So where you see an increase will be from that overtime that I talked
I'm
about
seeing a
before.
my point is, I'm seeing a decrease.
For next year.
You're missing something.
Yeah.
You're
You're
taking the
missing the
mud
debt.
suspense also.
Yeah.
So his 1.3 does not include the mud suspense.
Okay,
We're actually,
That's the debt.
the true budget we're looking at for with the mud dispense, we're looking at just shy of 1.9. So we're actually at 1.891804. That's with rent. That's with the gas fee replacement reserve. That's with the capital lease. There's more involved in that, and there's also the 92.5, which he doesn't show it in his budget because it's going to be a capital asset with our side, which would be the 75,000 for the exhaust plus the tool.
The extrication tools, those are actually in my budget. Those are actually in.
But they're not in this budget here
Yes,
because it won't be expense. How's it in your budget?
because the town pays for it originally, and then we true up at the end of the year for those expenses with the mud. So if you look under, let me get my budget. Give me just a second, I'm sorry. So under building maintenance, it should be, let's see, what does it show for building maintenance?
You put 93 in building.
Hmm?
93 in building.
93,000?
Yes.
Right. So that includes your 75 in building. That includes your 75 there. So if you look at that year compared to last year, it should be very close minus your 75.
Okay.
And then the same thing on tools and equipment. It should
So-
show about 30,000 if I remember correctly.
I mean, we're going to need to carry this on our books if we're going to do it as capital asset and carrying depreciation on our side. I mean, we can.
Okay, by contract, I'd just go back and review the contract and see.
Okay.
Because I just know that the town pays for it originally, and then that's part of the true up at the end for any capital assets. The same thing we did last year.
Okay, we'll talk about that in there.
Okay.
Will you make a copy of this presentation available to the board?
Yes, sir. I sure will.
So, Chief, there's a lot of numbers thrown around, you know, with the adjustment that Greg was talking about and what Stephen talked about. What is the net increase 2018 to 2019, 19 to 18?
I believe it's on, whoops. That's not the right way. If I remember correctly. You know what, it's in my notes and not in there. I believe it's $300,000.
So, 30%?
It's 24%?
Okay.
Yes, sir.
So my follow-up question was, as we looked at all of those future projects, 19, 20, 21, 22, is there a way for you to estimate what you think the budget might, what the impact on the budget might be going forward? I mean, we're looking at 25% next
Yes,
3
sir.
years?
If you look at, I believe you guys got a budget overview. If you look forward on that budget overview, it may not go out to 2025, but I can pull that from our budget software and I can show you those numbers. I just have to get it to you. I don't have them with me tonight. Any other questions? Okay.
Thank you. Wade, I'd like to express my appreciation. I've given Wade a bad time about the fact that, when a suit-stained firefighter stumbles out of a fire and wipes the smudge on her face and says, rarely are they going to say, man, we really appreciated that fire hydrant worked, unless it doesn't work. So we have a joint responsibility, I guess, at the root level between the water system and the fire department in terms of serving our community. That is an important thing, and I do want to express appreciation to Wade for giving this presentation on first day back from vacation. They've helped us out in several other places aside from that nexus of responsibility that happens at the fire hydrant. I do appreciate his help with some training exercises we've set up for our folks. That's been really helpful, and I appreciate that. Also, I've started to include in the general manager's report a brief blurb on fire department activity. If anybody has any feedback on whether that's too much or too little, I'd appreciate hearing that as well, so that we can right-size that for your consumption. So, but again, I do appreciate Wade and the professionalism that he brings to his craft.
Yeah. Thank you, Chief Carroll, for coming here, laying out your vision and your view, not only for 2019, but for the upcoming years. We appreciate that.
Thank you.
I do have one question, Chief.
Yes,
Has the council seen this presentation yet?
Not in its entirety, no.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Wade.
300K.
Okay, item number 3, consider and take appropriate action regarding the 2017 Consumer Confidence Report. Staff?
Mr. President, I don't have much to report other than I'm told that it's been a tradition that our board contemplates this, the reporting, both for the MUD and for the PID were completed on time and delivered to the appropriate residents. But there's this tradition of putting this on as an agenda item for our board to contemplate. It's a chance for anyone from the public to come and talk about that particular item. But certainly, I guess it's been my experience that we spend a lot of effort making this report, and there's not a whole lot of interest in it. We have a really high quality of water that we put out for our customers, both directly and indirectly. So I'm not totally sure what the appropriate action here is, other than to accept it. It's been published according to EPA guidelines, and I guess that's really what the staff has to say.
So I have a quick question. This is a report that has to be produced, correct, and distributed to our customers, correct?
Yes, sir. So under the Safe Drinking Water Act, there is a later amendment that included the CCR, the Consumer Confidence Report. It requires that certain testing data from the system be reported to the public, and to do so in a way that allows them to know what's in their drinking water.
Okay. And the purpose of me asking that question, so it seems like your question is whether or not it should be something that's presented to the board versus just distributed to the public when published, correct?
All of the guidelines that are required of the MUD for distributing it. So, for example, I had to take a copy of, I delivered it personally to the vineyards because those are folks that have a master meter. Realistically would not see something in their water bill saying go to our website, you can look at it here. I hand carried those copies over to those folks and delivered it at their main office. There has to be a good faith effort to make sure that everybody who reasonably should see that report has seen it. Under our contract with the town, we're responsible for creating that report for the customers who reside in the PID. We've completed that as well, and worked with Tommy Uzzi at the town. He signed that all of those were delivered to their folks. It's been posted on their website. There are very minor differences between the two reports, but they've been completed in accordance with the standards established by EPA and administered by the Texas Commission on Environmental Quality.
Vice President Rose?
I have a few questions. I sent you an email, highlighted some things, and I don't know if any of the other directors caught it or not. I'm on page 47 of the packet, 2017, talking about HAA5 total halocetic acids. We show a highest level detected of 12 and a range of levels detected from 2.7 to 7.8. That confuses me because how do I have a highest detected level that's outside of a range?
This falls into the category, and there's other areas where that's confusing as well. Let me just
I
say
got a
that.
couple
But
more.
so it falls into the area of what they call successive systems. So, for example, somewhere in the Fort Worth system, who are our wholesale providers, an 11 was measured, and that was in their reporting to the federal government
Okay.
under this rule. Now, that was never measured in our system. We have a set of sampling and reporting requirements, and so the range that we publish has to include that highest level detected from the Fort Worth system. It's ironic, for example, somewhere on here you'll see a number for cyanide. Cyanide was never tested in our system, but it was tested somewhere in the Fort Worth system, and as such, we had to report it on the MUD report. That said, because the PID is the next step in successive systems, it was not required to be reported in their report, and you will not find it as such. I'm going to call it a vagary of the reporting requirements under the Consumer Confidence Report laws.
Interesting, because the first one the one I asked about doesn't necessarily say that the source in that one was Fort Worth. That's disinfection byproducts.
Right.
But the one on down, turbidity, this comes from Fort Worth, I guess, and it says the highest single measurement was 0.22. The range looked good, 0.12 to 0.22. And then below that, it's percent of samples, but then it says the lowest, it calls for the highest single measurement, but then the comment below is lowest was 100, and then the range is 100 to 100. I just found it interesting that when they ask for the highest single measurement, that the comment would be a lowest number. Is
Yeah,
once again one of these.
It is, in fact, a vagary of the reporting rule, and it's very confounding to me because it looks like you're publishing information that is not exactly accurate based on the way that they call it. But that, in fact, goes to a treatment technique rule as opposed to a maximum contaminant level rule. So that falls under the Enhanced Surface Water Treatment Rule, and it relates to surface water, drinking water treatment facilities, and what they have to do if they exceed turbidity on a particular filter. What they have to do then is go back and make adjustments to their treatment technique. That's the requirement for that. But it's very specific in how that's supposed to be reported, and it seems to suggest that, well, even if that's not average or even likely, this is what you have to report. It's
You
the
have to
100th
report it.
percentile. So we have pushed that on to our customers, and it's an artifact of how the reporting comes through from TCEQ. They have a tool, so when you pull up these spreadsheets through the TCEQ website and you write in your system number, it tells you what are the bare minimum things you have to report.
Yeah.
That did not need to be reported in the PID, but it had to be reported for us.
Because of the one level above us.
Right.
Thank you for making me a lot smarter.
I'm sorry that doesn't give you any comfort, but
It's like,
what I will say is that Fort Worth produces a very high quality water, and the quality of water being delivered to our customers is equally high, as well as that of our friends that live in the PID. We're fortunate to have a very high quality of water and a very sophisticated treatment regimen that's going on in the Fort Worth system.
thank you.
Okay. I'll entertain a motion.
I move to accept, we'll do it that way. I move to accept the 2017 Consumer Confidence Report.
Vice President Rose has made a motion to accept the 2017 Consumer Confidence Report. Do I have a second?
I'll second.
It's been seconded by Director Chapman. Any comments? Hearing none, all in favor indicate by raising your hand. Motion passes unanimously.
Me too.
Item number 4, consider and take appropriate action to approve an interlocal agreement with Denton County for tax collection services for fiscal year 2018 2019. Staff?
I'd like to defer to our Chief Financial Officer on this one. I think that addresses the relationship we have with Denton County about how they collect our tax revenues.
Correct, that's pretty much it. I mean, we sign it every year as far as what their budget is and what they, our agreement is with them. There's not really a lot to say about it. Anybody have any questions for it? I guess is the question asked.
I'm not sure what we're doing then.
It's our interlocal agreement with them. I mean, we're gonna sign off on it. That
It allows
We're just
them-
accepting the
we're at-
agreement?
We're allowing, we're,
Yeah.
It's a contract.
It's a contract that we have with them for them to collect our taxes.
correct. We have to sign it every year.
Okay.
annually.
And it's on the agenda because it's something you and I will have to sign if it's approved.
Okay,
Correct.
understood.
Vice President Rose?
I move to approve the interlocal agreement with Denton County for tax collection services for fiscal year 2018 and 2019.
Okay, we have a motion to approve the interlocal agreement with Denton County for tax collection services for fiscal year 2018-2019. Do I have a second?
I'll second.
It was approved by Director Castaway. Any other comments or questions, discussion? Hearing none, all in favor indicate by raising your hand. Motion passes unanimously. Okay. Item number 5, consider and take appropriate action regarding district rebranding. Vice President Rose, Director Castaway.
I'll take the lead on it. Try to make this short, see if the voice holds up. Looking at the current logo for the MUD and its applications, I found that it was too busy and thought that it didn't necessarily represent the MUD in what the MUD does. So in conversations with Director Castaway, decided to make a presentation, do a little legwork, refine some concepts, and make a presentation. I'm on page 64 of the packet, if you're not there yet. So anyway, on page 65, you see the current logo. And when the current logo is reduced down in size, it becomes very difficult to read, and in my mind, becomes an eye test for someone younger than 30. I know President Wilson and I attended a AWBD board meeting or conference, I think it was a year ago, where the DC water story was told. And one of the things that was discussed in the DC water story was branding, and how their current brand was thought by many residents to have something to do with a penal institution, the way it was laid out. And so I took that information and said, what can we do to put forth the MUD story in a way that's more appropriate to what we do? Very briefly, as I look at the current logo and the clock tower with either a rising or setting sun behind it, the MUD doesn't own a clock tower. We don't build clock towers. We don't repair clock towers. And we don't take clock towers down. There's a question even of whether the clock tower belongs to the town or not. I was here when we built it. We made residents' contributions to it in conjunction with, I think, Mr. Beck. He owns the land that it sits underneath, and we all know when something's sitting on land, the general consensus is that whatever it is belongs to that person. So, long story short, I don't think it really fits us. I think what we need is a logo that says what we do, what we identify with. And what we identify with, I think, is clean water. Clean water is our business. We buy clean water from Fort Worth. We put it in a tank over here. We pump well water in. We treat the well water, put it in the tank, blend it with Fort Worth water. Then we take the water out of the tank and we put it in line, and we, once again, clean it, add chemicals to it to make sure it's clean and stays clean. We pump it into the system so that the residents can use it. System went away. It's dead. So anyway, we put it into the system so the residents can use it. Not only do we just put it in the system so they can use it, we go out to the end of the line and we check it. And we take samples. And we send those samples in and we test it to make sure that the water that the residents are getting is good. Clean water to your house, clean water for your lawn. The residents take that water, put it on their lawns, and they use it in their houses. They cook with it. They shower with it and use it in the wastewater system, and they give it back to us dirty. We take the dirty water and we sort the dirty parts out of it and put it back in the environment as clean water. We sell it to the club as clean water, or we put it in Lake Grapevine. It's clean water. Our business, from my perspective, is clean water. Our logo needs to say water. And so based on that, I cheated a little bit, looked at DC, and they used the DC, small letters, DC, and a water drop. That's DC's emblem. That's what they use. And I took that and I said, how just based on that, what can we do? And I used, as you see on the next page, I think it's on page, what do you got there?
65.
On 65, you see a breakout of all of them in a smaller, all of them, meaning 12 of them, 12 potential ones that I and Kelly worked on. Actually, there were many more than 12. And we did sorting and eliminating and said, that one, I don't think, looked at some of them and said, you know, there we developed it, but I don't think anybody on the board would go, oh, that's a great idea. Just throw it away. And so cut it down to 12, and those are before you. A little bit about the colors. The blue, obviously for water. Green. Why green? Why green on the TC? We are an environmental organization. We are, I will bet, the largest environmental organization in Trophy Club. In our area, we are the largest environmental organization. Name anyone else who has the EPA looking over their shoulder, who has the Texas Commission on Environmental Quality looking over their shoulder, making sure that they are environmentally sensitive. We are a green organization. Okay, so that's the color. Font style. And here again, and I present this today as concepts. All the colors, all the concepts, this could all go away, all be changed. Font style. I looked at the font styles, went through about 90 of them in green tones, and said, our font style needs to be rounded. We deal with water. Water's soft. Water doesn't have sharp edges. So we need a rounded font style. And so there are actually 3 that are in here. So that's the font style. So basically, the other thing that I picked up on is water for life. Here again, DC used it, water is life. And I can't copy the District of Columbia. So I think water for life, if you're looking for a mode to go along with it, would be something that would play well. And so then you have those factors basically working down through 1 through 8 with the water drop. On 9, that's a faucet. And here again, there were other variations of this. It looks a little bit busy and difficult to break out when you get the water in the U. Number 10 is a water fountain. And It also, I don't think, plays well. You know, I will say, take your pick later, but I don't think that one plays well either because of the overlay in the green and the blue. And it just, I don't think, go ahead.
I have a question.
Sure.
Do you guys recommend one?
No, don't want to do that. Here's my, as you look at all of these, as I walk down through them, my concept for working this is I believe, one, the staff, our employees need to have a play in this. I mean, if somebody else has some other ideas, would like to present those, I would love to hear that. I would like to hear that. But if I was only working with these, what I would say, my plan would be, is for each person and each employee to pick 5. Label what you like, 1 through 5. We'll then apply values to 1 through 5, rank them, take the top 3, and if they need any tune it up, bring it back, and once again, employees and board pick what they rank, pick the top one and 2, and we will then take the top 1 for the mud.
I have a suggestion.
Sure.
To supplement what you're saying, why don't we throw it out to some of the residents to see if some of them have any ideas of some that they think would be appropriate as well, and we can add that to the mix and go through a scoring system similar to yours, and then
The timeline I was working on, to put another factor in here, the timeline I was working on is when we finish the budget, the employees begin buying clothes the 1st of October.
Mhm.
So if we're going to do a rebranding and have it in effect in the early part of next year, we need to move, not quickly, but not drag it out too far either.
correct. Yeah, I think it's something where we could solicit suggestions from the citizens for a month or two, and well, because here's the thing: even if the budget's approved, they don't necessarily have to buy the items. Even though the budget's approved 1 October, they don't necessarily have to purchase them. But I agree with you. This should not be something we drag out a year and a half. It could be something that we could possibly try to target by the end of the year, unless there's something that I'm not contemplating. Mike, is there something you have in mind?
Well, I was going to say, look at Mike's smile. I think
Yeah.
he has a big opinion on what this
he-
logo's going to say.
Got a lot of uniforms to order in my current budget. If you look at my line item, I probably have not spent very much in there because this is a time we're ordering, probably sweatshirts and all that stuff, getting coats, getting ready for winter. I have not done that in my 18 budget yet.
Okay.
So if this is something that we're going to do, I would say we probably would like to move quickly with it. I mean, it doesn't have to be today or tomorrow, but,
I was hoping to wrap it up at the next meeting, no later than the September meeting.
Well, I'd say let's give the citizens, I think if we gave them a couple of weeks or a month, or let's say a week prior to our next meeting, we could take those thoughts in and integrate them and then make it part of the review process as we go into the next meeting.
Okay, how would you propose to do that?
We can, obviously, we can put something on the, obviously on the town website. Do we have a mechanism to communicate with all of our citizens, all of our customers in a non-emergency forum where we can push the information out and direct them back to the website to get more information? And then we can do we have a website where we can receive all of those comments? It's like a shared mailbox, so it's not coming to a particular individual, or we can have it go to maybe.
Have them send them to the info email.
Yeah, we can have them do that. And I think the ones that are interested in participating in endeavors such as that, 3 weeks would be sufficient time to gather their thoughts and ideas and submit something.
Yeah, one of the important things, I think, as you look at a logo is you need to stay away from something that's busy. And as I look at especially 9 and 10, those are really busy. 7 and 8 are little,
Bill,
are busy. Go ahead.
I agree with everything everybody's saying. I think we should narrow this down a little bit I think going out with 12 is too many. And it's not just a number that's too many. For instance, your first comment when you started off was our current logo is very hard to read when you get it smaller. Well, you can apply that to 11 and 12. You could never
Certainly.
read those letters at all, ever.
Exactly.
And
Exactly.
if Mike's putting them on a shirt, I mean, nobody's going to see it.
Exactly.
So my point is, I would have no problem getting rid of a couple of those,
Yeah.
even 9 and 10. I mean, I want to vote here, but let's narrow it down to the top 5, 6, 7, and go out. in
I
my
mean, to be
opinion.
honest with you, if you look through 1 through 8, well, if you look through 1 through 6, the only difference between them is how you situate the T and the C.
Yeah,
One's lowercase and one's uppercase.
Yeah, and so,
and whether they're connected or not, yeah.
yeah, so, I mean,
And I'm absolutely against lowercase. Bill knows that. So I don't like the lowercase. I think that's disrespecting Trophy Club.
You and my wife wound up on the same thing. She said, that's a town name. You don't make that lowercase.
Yeah,
I
it's-
went,
it's,
but,
yeah.
I went, but District of Columbia did it.
I mean, if you
Lowercase.
take that, if you take that opinion, if we're agreeing, and Greg started with 1 through 8, you automatically eliminate 1, 2, 3, 4.
You eliminate.
I mean,
four,
now we're talking 4 or 5 logos.
You
Yeah.
knock, you knock
That's-
out the, just that quick,
Yeah,
you knock
now
out
you
one in a
take,
row. Yeah.
now all you have left is 2, 4, 6, and 8.
But like I say, you know, if we do it as I suggested, if we get that initial cut and then take that initial cut out to the town, then we would have a smaller number. If we would be down to 5. If we do the initial pick 8 and then go with 5 or 3, I was counting. I was going to pick 5 and eliminate. What I was going to do is you pick 5 and we'll eliminate down to 5. The top 5 vote getters stay. And then if you take those, then you would be down to 5 to send out.
And then the residents send in their ideas too,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, okay, but how do you weigh that? If you have
Okay, that's
4
easy.
residents that weigh in, and we have the board and we have the staff, I mean, I don't know how you have,
well, at that point, you go to the, kind of the scoring, we could use the scoring mechanism that they recommend, have everyone, you pick 5 and go with a weighing, and
Okay.
then go from there, and you select one that's,
yep, I'm fine with it.
and you can have kind of the residents kind of do the same thing if they want to opine on it. What do you like best, or what would you like? And we can factor that in as well.
You know,
Somewhat of a compressed time period, but I think giving them a say would be a nice touch to
Yeah.
get some civic involvement
I need the employees on board first.
on board to
On
what?
board to do, you know.
Yeah,
I need the employees to take a, like, you know, we look at this and go, okay, we can pick, I could go through here. I don't have any more ideas because I've been playing with it. Somebody, you know, other people may have other ideas. I've already eliminated some of my ideas. So anyway, yeah.
Okay.
Mike,
I think the employees, I'm sure we have a couple that are very creative that would bring some, ideas back.
okay,
The only other thing I have associated with this, this is our logo, so our vehicles have all
Got
this
that,
stuff on
yep.
our current uniforms, so I just want to make sure that you guys know there's a cost
there's a
incurred with
cost.
this. It was
Yeah.
not budgeted, so.
Well,
Yeah.
rebranding is in the next budget, I believe.
Has the cost of the complete rebranding being considered? I'm sorry.
No.
Okay, so we need to, if we're going to go down this path, then if staff could put together a cost of the complete rebranding, vehicles and all the things that would be impacted by this decision. So when we're making this decision, we're making a educated decision, because what we may think is great, on the website it becomes easy. If you come back and say it's 300,000 to repaint all the
Yeah.
trucks and water towers and all this stuff, then it may take on a different response.
Yeah, and one of the things you can do, I won't say a lot of places, it depends upon your organization. Some of them do it based on a replacement. You know, the vehicle's gonna wear the old branding until you get the new vehicle. So which with the vac truck coming on board, might be a good time if you're gonna make a change, not to put the old logo on it. If we decide to change.
I'm also not too sure about number 2. It's not much better than lowercase. If you look
And
at it
that can be-
solidly, I mean,
That can be the font, too.
Well, I think if you stack them on top of each other, it's going to necessitate smaller
That's what
font
happened.
size, or you're gonna have to have a much larger raindrop.
Yeah, and the thing about it is, yeah, that's exactly what it was. We balanced the height of the TC out with the raindrop.
Number six
exactly-
takes care of that.
Yeah.
I like that.
I like that.
Yeah, I like that
So
too.
That's kind of
If I had to pick out of the first 8,
I'm with,
probably go
I'm with you,
six.
Greg.
And once again, the font styles and the coloring can all go, all change. I picked up a little bit of, otherwise, I was gonna say negative input on the color, on the mud number 1, whether it should be brown or not. To look, maybe different color, but that's all in a later discussion.
Yeah.
So,
Not too sure.
Greg, did you need to put it on the,
For light.
Oh, Carmen?
I would like that all blue.
Oh, Lori, I'm sorry.
you mean to put it on the district website? I can't put anything on the town website.
Did I say the town website?
Yeah,
I apologize, I meant the district website.
just checking.
I was going to clarify that as well. We can ask to have it put on the town website, but that's not something we have control over. Secondly, I'm an engineer by training, and so one side of my brain is really strong, but it's not the side that's good with art sort of things. So we'll just leave that at that point. And I would advise everyone to think about the case of Boaty McBoatface. There was a great ship that was put out by the British government, and they had a public event to get a name for the new boat. Someone suggested that, and that was the #1 selected name for the new ship, Boaty McBoatface. So you have to be careful sometimes when you ask these questions.
That's when I say suggestions.
Yes. I would advise you all to look up Boaty McBoatface, and you will see a really interesting story in public dialogue and stakeholder input.
Okay. So, is the goal of this exercise now to get down to 4 or 5 of these to send the staff forward with, or what's our next step here?
I would say that the goal is to get down to 5, and I would do that on a 2-week basis. We can make our inputs, if you don't mind me using your district secretary or the district secretary, we can make our inputs to the district secretary. I'll explain the scoring, and she can also gather the information from the staff. And in 2 weeks, we can have 5.
So we take this 12 down to 5 and
Yep.
then integrate
Then go to
their
then go-
staff suggestions, and then,
We get between us and the employees, we come up with 5.
okay, so in reality, we can't do anything with this until the staff gives us their suggestions.
No, we'll give it to we'll give our you give your vote 1 through 5 to the district secretary. All the rest of us do that, and
But
then we'll
how am I
skip-
going to evaluate the staff suggestions if I don't have it yet?
She gets it. We're all going to have an equal vote in this. You got the same vote.
No,
Yeah.
I understand that. But in order for me to do that, I have to have the staff ones to take, let's say staff comes back with 4 more. So then I have to go from this 16 total down to 5.
So if
So
I-
we have to have the staff ones first before we can vote.
You're
So if I
right.
send out an e-blast tomorrow or the next day requesting anybody who would like to participate to send in an idea, if anybody has an idea for rebranding for our logo, to send it in and give them a deadline date. And allow staff to do the same thing and give their input on these. All of the ideas can be brought back to the board for review and to make their final choices with the staff's final choices. I can bring all that back to you for you to make your final choices.
Okay, so would it be reasonable to say, give the staff 1 week to to submit theirs? And then once they come in, I'm sorry?
I think that that's too short of
You
a
think that's too
timeframe. I
short?
think we need to give a little bit more leeway here on time
Okay,
to make it good.
okay. Well, 2 weeks?
We're already out.
You think that's reasonable?
2 weeks, okay?
Feel free not to bite your tongue.
Um,
Speak freely.
Yeah, the bills haven't gone out yet, have they? We might be able to get something on the bill.
3,
Huh?
You said 2 to
2 or
3 weeks?
2 to 3.
Yeah, I think 2.5 to 3, we should say.
Okay.
Okay.
Put a date on it, just say
That we would get more.
August 10th or something, put a
So,
date on it.
Well, if you say 3 weeks from today, which would be the third Monday, 3 Mondays from now, whatever that is.
6.
Okay, so the staff will have their recommendations in by the 6th, and then from there, we'll have 1 week to get in our recommendations back to district secretary on R5
Which will have their inputs included.
included.
So we'll have, okay, I'm happy.
And then, with that time, we can also send the blast out to all the citizens, and that gives them 3 weeks to get their recommendations in, or their suggestions in.
I thought I would send it tomorrow.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. If you send it tomorrow, then it gives them 3 weeks to get their suggestions in. I'm sorry?
Just to clarify, people are just sending in their suggestions. There's not gonna be a decision rendered outside of a meeting, right?
No.
No,
No,
not
what
at
they're
all.
going to do is, we're going to say, so if we get 16, we'll say, I like 6, that's my number 1.
And there'll be no copying of other directors?
No. All the comments goes back to the district secretary.
But I guess I'm confused. If we're sending a blast to the masses tomorrow,
It's for them to input any ideas that they have. They could send me through the info line.
okay, so we're not sending any of this stuff out?
Nope,
Okay.
because then
that-
everything will come
okay.
back to the board, all
Then-
the
then I'm
staff
clear.
ideas,
Okay.
along with their input on what's in the packet. And then, all of that will come back to the board, and you all can then separately email me what you like. And then we can present that at the next meeting.
We can't talk to each other. We can talk
You
to
can
the
singly
secretary,
talk to me.
Yeah.
I will not copy anybody else.
but the secretary can't tell us what each one of us said.
I got that.
Do we have a plan?
We have a plan. Mr. Harmon?
Just want to kind of suggest that we shouldn't feel artificially constrained about an upcoming budget. We do have some limited capacity on the staff to actually spend the money that we have in the budget. I mean, that's a reality. And so, you look at our budget for uniforms right now, and I suspect we haven't even spent half of what we budgeted for this year. If we know that there's a change in the logo coming up, I think that, we can be prudent and take that into account as we make choices going forward. So shouldn't be an artificial constraint.
I completely agree with you. I mean, we can always delay the acquisition of future uniforms, other items, until a decision is made. So I don't think we need to take a action on this. I think we've given staff direction, so.
As the board goes, we just need to just list which ones you got, 1 through 5. And the way this will work is if you vote number 1, it gets 5 points. Number 2 gets 4 points. And we just add up all the points, and that one goes to the top, and you get your list. Same with the employees, and also, I mean, that's after we get the employees' input,
Yeah.
okay? Because we may have other inputs there.
Yeah, but that's 3 weeks from now, a
Yeah.
month from now, whatever,
Okay,
so.
yeah, I'm good.
Okay.
You good?
Item number 6, consider and take appropriate action regarding the June 2018 Combined Financials and Variance Report. A, Combined Financials. B, Combined Variance Report. Secretary Treasurer Flynn.
Just had a couple questions that I called Stephen on. They were minor, very small questions, and he answered those sufficiently. So everything else I looked, the variance report and the financials looked acceptable. I would recommend approval.
Do you have a motion?
I have a motion that I would recommend that we approve the 2018 combined financials and variance report, that being the combined financials and the combined variance report.
You mean you have a motion to do
I
that,
have a
correct?
motion
Okay, correct.
to approve
Okay.
2018.
We have a motion from
Combined.
Secretary Treasurer Flynn to approve the 2018 Combined Financial and Variance Report.
I second.
We have a second by Director Castaway. Any discussion? Hearing none, all in favor indicate by raising your hand. Okay, motion passes unanimously. Item number 7, consider and take appropriate action to set the date and time for a special meeting budget workshop to review preliminary budget. Staff?
Mr. President, I ask that this be put on the agenda really driven by a comment that you made to me a few months ago. So it really starts with the way that an enterprise fund like ourselves really makes rates is that we look at what is our forthcoming budget, our forecasted budget for the following year, and then what is the sufficient amount of revenue necessary to make that budget balance. We're not for profit, obviously, so we're simply trying to come to a balanced budget. I think you are correct in the sense that last year we approved the rate increases before we actually approved the budget. That is a reality. But underneath the hood, so if you're looking under the hood in this engine, there was a draft budget that was sent to our consultants that help us with rate making. And we used that as the basis upon which the initial rate recommendations came forward. Now, in our last regular meeting, I think I'm stating that correctly, we chose not to form a budget or a rates committee, but rather to bring that to the entire board.
Well, we formed a rate
The rates
committee, but not a budget committee.
So in terms of, fair enough, so in terms of the budget committee for input, we would like an opportunity to maybe have a 1-hour session to just go through the draft budget, because we're really kind of in that formulation stage right at the moment, to say, you know, at this level, this is what we're looking at, kind of go through the higher level items. I don't imagine it'd be more than half hour to an hour. And we had proposed perhaps the 30th of July as a date for that meeting. So that we could begin our process with giving that data to the rate consultant, who would presumably bring it back to the rate committee then and go through that initial cut of running it through the engine to take a look at that. Just because of timing, we felt like it made sense to have that special budget workshop, just keep it informal and fairly simple, but to go through basically the input data in our draft budget, which would go into the rate-making process.
First cut.
First cut.
Okay. Personally, I am available on the 30th, but I would request instead of doing it 6, we do it at 6:30.
I'm good on the 30th. And
I'm
you can
fine.
have more than an hour. For me.
Are we trying to fill up your Mondays?
Yes, you're gonna have to fill up your social calendar through some other mechanism other than special meetings.
I'm not available on the 19th for the 23rd July, 4/12 August, or 31 August, 12 September. So it's,
I'd like to make a recommendation if I can. Mike will actually be out on Monday, and I would like to have him there because he would be a big part of the budget. And just in case you guys had any questions on capital expenses, and maybe I'm not 100% familiar with it, he would be the person to really lean on and ask questions about.
So you're saying he's not available
He'll
on
be-
July 30th?
Correct. He'll be back in town on the 1st, or I'm sorry, on the 31st? 31st. On
It would be
Tuesday.
nice to have Mike here, but I think for timing-wise and getting through the process, we're going to have to just punt in his absence. So he's out for an important family purpose, and I support that. You know, if we want to push it back,
31st? You get
Well,
back the 31st?
no, I think he's,
No, he gets back.
On the 30th?
I will actually probably be in town the 30th. I just don't know if I'll be able to make the meeting.
Never should have said that.
But he'll be back to work on the 31st, correct?
Yes.
That is a Tuesday. I'm also available on the 31st, but I would make the same request on time.
Works for me.
Yeah, I'm available.
Director Chapman?
I am looking. The 31st at 6:30?
6:30 would be my request.
For the operations
can make that
manager, I'll make myself available and clear the schedule at that time.
Okay, sounds like, does that work with staff?
I'll be present.
yes, sir.
I'm always here.
we're working to change that.
Yeah, we're gonna try and work on that.
It's just really just no action, sort of a meeting. Thank you.
Okay, I don't think we need to take any action there. Item number 8, receive report from directors who attended the AWBD 2018 Annual Conference. Anyone like to share their experience from the conference?
Yeah, I'll share it. I thought it was beneficial from a newbie onto the mud board. So while Greg and Bill, you might have thought this was kind of old hand, same old. I didn't find that way. I thought the breakouts were well done, and I liked the fact that we all kind of divided and conquered. There were some overlaps in the conferences, but we kind of tried to all attend different breakout seminars. I thought the general sessions were fine. Overall, it was positive. I enjoyed it.
Anyone else? Didn't go.
No, I felt the same way as Director Flynn. It was my first time going to, and it was very informative. And like he said, we did. There were some sessions we did go in together, and then some that we separated, and then we'd come back together during the meals and just discuss what we learned and talked about and shared. So it was very informative, and thank you for letting us go.
Anything, Vice President Rose?
I'll let you go first.
I'll close out.
I was trying to think, there was, every time you go to one of these conferences, it's like, I've seen that before, I've seen this before, but occasionally, it's like every time something comes up new, and you walk away and go, wait a minute, I think I better take that back and give it to the general manager and say, oh, by the way, look what's coming down the line. And this time, I can't remember what the component was, but it was something with TCEQ and testing.
Was it the chloroform?
I don't remember exactly what it was like. They were
Jason.
they were changing the way chloramines. They were changing the way nitrification. They were changing the way they were doing the testing from from looking at an end result to trying to find back upstream where the cause was, and it was going to require some different testing. And it was like, wait a minute, this is going to be expensive. So, and they had some training that they were, and I don't remember the TCEQ fellows.
Jason.
Jason.
Sent me a email.
Yeah,
The
classes.
revised total chloroform workshops.
Yep.
It was July 11th and 12th, 11th in Dallas and the 12th in Fort Worth.
Yeah. So anyway, that was,
So we're close, right? That's total coliform, not total chloroform.
Cola.
Very different sort of notions. One is a bacterial element. It's a bacteria, an actual life form, whereas chloroform is a subspecies of the chloramination process. So they sound very close. But
Just checking to make sure you were paying attention.
yeah, so I am familiar with what's going on there, and there's actually some connectivity, ironically, in the sense that Texas, and particularly North Texas, is one of the only places I've been in all of America that chloraminates, which means you put a little bit of chlorine, a little bit of ammonia in the water to create residual disinfectant, but that we don't go through an annual burnout process where they switch back to straight chlorine. Now, we saw some press coverage on that with the North Texas Municipal Water District just recently. People tend to notice it because there's a distinct difference in the aesthetic quality of chlorinated water versus chloraminated water. I can tell the difference just because it's something I focus on. And it's an important thing that people do. They should go through and do a burnout every year. There's not been a burnout on the Fort Worth system since they started chloraminating in the 70s. That tends to lead to issues with nitrification in the system, which are connected back to total coliform rule, and so it's interconnected in that sense. So I'm not sure what the exact presentation was on, but there is a big difference between coliform and chloroform.
Just want you to make you aware of both of them.
Thank you.
Educated again, thank you.
Okay,
Knowledge is a dangerous thing.
See what you missed?
I just said a little knowledge is a dangerous thing.
Yeah.
I don't have any additional comments or commentary.
I could do one other thing, and that's to remind the new directors that there is a training session for new directors coming up. I don't remember what the date was on it.
August 11th.
Okay, I strongly encourage attendance. It will be more beneficial than the board meeting, what we just had for you guys. Yeah.
I think maybe he's trying to drop a hint.
He said strongly when he looked at
Yes,
you.
it's- yeah.
That's all, that's what I picked up on. Yeah.
Okay. Item number 9, General Manager monthly reports and updates. A, regulatory updates. B, capital improvement, interconnect water transmission line phase 1 and 2, wastewater treatment plant upgrade project, high service pump, joint project with town. C, fire department summary. D, water system operations. E, water system operations. F, finance update, utility billing report, permits collected, and cash report. General Manager Carmen?
Mr. President, let me just try to keep it brief and say that we have all of these items in your packet for your review. Certainly be ready to answer any questions except perhaps on the fire department report, as Chief Carroll has left, and I'm probably not competent to report out on the sort of things that the fire department is tackling. That said, might give me some notes that I may want to draw your attention to. First off, we have no information on the regulatory front. We've had no violations on the wastewater side, no sanitary sewer overflows, no items on the drinking water side that have required reporting to TCEQ, so a clean bill of health on that front. On phase 1 of the interconnecting transmission line, we're trying to come to the proper name for that so we can refer to it all the way through. But effectively, the project that starts here in our parking lot goes down under Trophy Club Drive and provides water for PD 30 as it starts to go vertical. We've certainly seen plenty of activity on that side, but they have to have fire protection in place before they can start vertical construction activities. We are trying to get our coordinate with our contractor to get to where we do what they call a line stop. It will happen out here in the parking lot, and it allows them to tap that water line into an existing water line by the police station. That is coming up in the next week or two, is what I understand. We've had a lot of back and forth with them. They've started boring on the other end to take the line under Trophy Club Drive. I've seen the boring equipment out there. This line stop is going to be a pretty significant piece of work. It will require them to do some welding on the old line to make the connection with the new PVC line and the interconnecting piece. So that's within the next 14 days. Anything to add?
Does that come off?
I think it's actually
The
scheduled
line.
for Monday.
Okay, so the line comes off the pumps and comes as far as the fire station, going someplace else, and you're gonna tie into it there?
We're gonna tie into it right over here between the annex building and the old police station. If you look down there, you can see where they've already dug up there.
Okay, so what size line do we start off with, and what size line do we finish up with?
Okay, so we have a 24-inch line coming out of our main pump station. It goes to a 20-inch going down behind Summit Cove and a 16-inch coming this way.
And we're gonna add a
I'm
16-inch.
gonna add a 16 to it.
Okay.
I had previously described the potential for a change order on that piece because the actual materials of the existing pipe were not defined on the plans. It's not sure to me that that's gonna happen yet. I haven't heard anything else come back from the contractor. So at this point, there's really nothing to consider there, but that's a significant step forward in providing water supply to PD 30. On phase 2, you all have seen the kind of what is nearly the final alignment on that drawing on my table. We were going to try to have a presentation on that for this board meeting, but there are some final steps that HAF is taking. They're about 50% done with the plans, but they're trying to finalize some of the easement definitions and felt that it would be a better presentation for the August board meeting. So we've punted that to the next board meeting, but they're about halfway done. And, you know, I think it's looking good for an updated cost estimate that will be in our favor. At the wastewater plant,
I have a question on phase 2.
Sure.
Mentioned in here TCEQ requested the separation out of easement costs from construction costs.
Sir.
Okay, are the easement costs allowed under the TCEQ bond?
Yes, they are.
Just a matter of where it was located?
It's how it's characterized. And so if you look back at any of the estimates that HAF has provided for this project, they've shown easement costs as a part of construction cost. You know, the only reservation that our friends at TCEQ had was, well, those probably fall more in the overhead costs of the project, like legal, engineering, you know, property acquisition. It's not a construction cost.
Okay.
And they wanted them characterized differently so that when they go through their analysis process, they can lump them into the lumps that they're used to seeing. So
Are we getting a feeling that they're somewhere close to coming up with an approval on this, or?
We went through the preliminary review, which was effectively a process not designed for water districts, but which allows you to go through, kind of get an initial, yeah, that looks good to us sort of approach. This was one of the comments that came back.
Okay.
If you go through into the formal process and you're not ready for prime time, there's a black hole element of that has unknown time parameters. So we're trying to comply with what they asked for, that they wanted to see in terms of how we characterize those costs. And I think we're very close on that front.
I think Tony had some.
Only that they have a standard format, and they segregate construction costs from non-construction costs, and the easement cost would be part of the non-construction, so I'm sure that's what they were describing.
So we just did not have it characterized in a way that met their desire. So we're trying to give them what they want. On the wastewater plant project, we've had some progress on the wastewater plant effluent diversion structure pumping arrangement to help us comply with our contractual obligations with the Trophy Club Golf Course. Mike, do you want to give an update on where we stand on that?
Sure. So last week they installed the 2 big 40 horsepower effluent pumps, and we did a startup on them, put them online. We had the manufacturers with the contractors, everybody out there testing everything. So since Tuesday morning, when everything was put online, all of the effluent leaving the wastewater plant has made it to the golf course lakes. None of it has been going to the creek.
If you had to guess, Mike, what percentage increase was that versus the old pumps? A third, 50%?
I would say about a 30% increase. We were giving them about around 600,000 gallons a day. Now they're probably getting a little over 900,000 gallons a day. So I met with golf course superintendent, Scott. I brought him down to show him the progress that we made and also enlighten him to the progress that we will be making this week in taking the 2 smaller Lake B pumps out and replacing them. So right now we have the ability to pump to Lake A and Lake B. We just don't have the ability to pump just to Lake B because those 40 horsepower pumps are so big that you have to have some water going to Lake A also, otherwise you would blow out a line.
Have the levels actually increased? I haven't looked at them lately. Can you tell a noticeable?
So I asked him, after we ran it for 24 hours, I asked him to check the lakes and see if he noticed the difference. He said he actually irrigated out of Lake A and everything, but he did notice it had come up a few inches actually also, even though he did irrigate out of it.
you mentioned pumps at Lake B. Do we, do we have another set of pumps?
No, these are all at the lift station, right at the effluent basin.
Okay.
We're replacing 4 pumps. 2 have been replaced, the big one's to Lake A, now they're gonna replace the 2 smaller ones.
I have a question on the picture that was in the packet. Looks like it's got the piping coming up and over the side of, must be a basin. Is it the pump that's setting on top? No, that looks like a valve.
That's a valve.
Okay.
The pump itself is a submersible pump that sits down at the bottom, and that's the effluent piping from that pump.
Okay,
So there's a similar arrangement with the 2 small pumps, which would be north of these 2 pumps, and they're the next to get replaced. So what Mike's talking about is the line that goes to Lake B has a different length and a different diameter than the one that goes to Lake A. So when we turn on one of these really big pumps, that's just way too much for the small line that goes to Lake B. So typically we would run those, maybe a small one and a big one, kind of handle them separately. And that's how that plays out. But these are all submersible pumps, which sit down at the bottom of the basin. And then this would be the effluent piping as well as the electronic controls for that pump.
and so the B pumps we're starting now,
Yes, they will
And-
be starting actually tomorrow morning.
and this wasn't included in the basic rework, it wasn't basic rework
It was all included,
in the wastewater treatment plant
yes,
project.
in the
Okay.
upgrade.
Thank you.
One of the, I think, important things to note here is that in order to accomplish this work, we are pumping dry the effluent diversion structure and putting the wastewater plant in sleep mode. There's no water being processed during the middle of the night while they're doing this work, or actually it could be happening during the day. But we're pumping it completely dry and then turning the plant off and relying on the volume in the plant to just kind of come up while they're doing this work, because they have to get into the box to replace those pumps. We want them to be able to do it in a safe fashion for their workers as well. So, but effectively, we're turning the plant off for that period of time, and depending on the storage that's within the basins themselves, to just keep holding water until they can get their work done. Then we turn them on, run a bunch of water through, and pump it all over to the lake.
Good.
No reports on high service pumps, and on our joint projects with the town, I took a drive through there myself before I headed to Austin last week. They're getting really close on the roads on Phoenix Drive. It's looking good. They were doing a bunch of repair work on, I should say interface work with a lot of the folks' driveways, which would be on the right-hand side as you head up from the Indian Creek side of that. So it's looking good. They probably have a few more weeks to go to get through with that. They can't really move on to the regular Indian Creek improvement till we get to that point, but I think they're getting close. And just from a casual observation, it looks like they're doing good work. So, Mr. President, that's the report that I have. There's, of course, water system, wastewater system reports, as well as some in the finance update. If you have any questions, staff is here and ready to answer your questions.
Any other questions?
I just wanted to highlight the fact, if you look under the water build on page 171, June was call it 119 million gallons. That's a big number for June. The top number on the file goes back to 2011, and it was in August, 170 million gallons. One thing to note about that August is we didn't have restrictions of 2 days a week back then. Those restrictions went into effect in 2012. So just a balance, but we are selling water like crazy.
If I may, so yesterday, as in Sunday, we sold about 5.8 million gallons of water, 5.799. I'm sure you guys know our peak is set at 4.79 from Fort Worth. In the next 10 days, I've seen it being 105 with no chance of rain. So just want to make everybody aware of that. We're going to do our best, but it's getting hot and people are going to start watering more.
But you can bring it, you've got the peak that you're talking about is before we It's not an operational peak in that we can't bring in more water.
No.
The peak is that it's gonna cost.
It's gonna
we-
cost us more.
We go above our peaking amount, and so we start paying even more for our water when we go above the peak. So our costs go up.
And that, the math on that can be read in the contract that was in your book, if you want to
Yeah.
go through that process. It's kind of convoluted.
I know.
But,
Very convoluted.
they look at a 3-year running average of peaks and set kind of our base peaking cost on that. So when they reevaluate that this year, they're going to look at it because it goes either your last 3-year average, or if you go over that,
You come out of 3 wet years when you don't sell a lot of water.
you're going to get a new number.
Yeah.
And you're going to eat, and they actually lowered our number this year. So our peak, the amount we could have before we hit peak went down.
So I'd say if we're gonna blow it, let's blow it big time.
You can, but I mean, they're gonna charge you for that. I mean, if you go back and look at 2015, 2016, I mean, you can see we were pumping half that
Yeah,
amount
but I
of
mean,
water.
it'll be painful this year, but subsequent years, it will be less painful.
Yeah.
If we have some more wet years.
I like the dry years right now. It's helping me with my reserve quotient. So,
Right. Any other,
no,
reports, updates? Do we need to go in executive session?
Mr. President, I think not with respect to number 10, and Tony can chime in on this, but I think a brief discussion pursuant to number 11 would be appropriate. At least I have nothing with respect to items A or B under 10.
Okay. So pursuant to section 551-071 of the Texas Open Meeting Act, the board may consult with this attorney in executive session on a matter in which the duty of the attorney to the governmental body underneath.
I think we're gonna do 11, which is the 072.
I would be interested, I would be interested in getting an update on B.
Okay.
10B.
Okay.
I apologize. Keep going then.
Yeah, keep on. You're doing a good job.
Underneath the disciplinary rules of professional conduct of the State Bar of Texas clearly conflicts with the Open Meeting Act, or to seek the advice of counsel on legal matters involving pending or contemplated litigation or settlement offers. And item 11, pursuant to 551-072 of the Texas Open Meeting Act, the board may deliberate the purchase, exchange, lease, or value of real property if deliberations in an open meeting would have a detrimental effect on the position of the governmental body in negotiations with a third party. So we're going to discuss 10B, Trophy Club Mud 1 versus Arcadia Service in the District Court of Tarrant County, 141. Judicial District Case Cost Number 141-299-351-18, as well as District Real Property located at 100 Municipal Drive and 1501 Junction Way. It is now 8:28, and we will enter into executive session.
Bathroom break.
9:08. We're returning to regular session. No decision, votes, or actions was taken based on any executive session item. So that's number 12. Item number 13, items for future agenda. Is there anything?
Actually, what you did was a statement that nothing occurred back there, so now you're out here to do item 12 and there's no action to take.
Okay, yeah, there's no action to take on item number 12.
Yep.
Item number 13, items for future agenda. Hearing none.
Oh, I do have 2 things.
Okay,
One of which will be working the logo. The other one is we'll do the presentation, presentation policy. We need to put that on the next agenda. You and I talked about it. Tony worked on it. It didn't make it back in, so we'll do that next time.
anything else? Okay, we have future meeting, we have the July 20,
Just to clarify, will we adopt proposed tax rates at the next meeting?
Correct.
Okay. And final tax rates in September?
Okay, we've got a joint meeting with the town on July 24th. We've got a budget meeting on July 31st. And then our regular August board meeting on August 20th. Is there any other items for this meeting? If not, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
I move to adjourn.
So moved, so
Second.
adjourn.
No, you get a second and a
Second.
I
vote.
don't need a second and a vote.
You do? Yeah, you do.
For what? Not to adjourn the meeting.
Second.
Second.
All in
Motion's
favor?
been second.
I'm in favor.
You don't need that to adjourn.
Take the
the-
hammer away.
At 9:10, the meeting's adjourned at 9:10. What do you need all that to adjourn the meeting?
He stole his hammer.
You can't take the hammer. That's,
Yeah, I took it right away from him.
And then
He
it
lays
was,
it over here for me, too.
and then it wasn't even necessary.